Welcome to Share, a podcast production of Amatus Recovery Centers. I'm your host, Kabir Singh. At the top of each show, we'd like to remind our listeners that addiction is treatable and recovery is possible. If you or a loved one is struggling with addiction, call Amatus today at 855-80-SOBER or visit us online at amatusrecoverycenters.com. During active addiction, many of us were more isolated than we'd ever been. We were ashamed of our addictions and our behavior, and really just afraid to seek help. Some schools of thought believe that the opposite of addiction is not solely abstinence, but community. That's the topic of our show today, building a recovery network. Joining us at Amatus headquarters in Owings Mills, Maryland, is Liz Silverberg, Amatus's own human resources officer. Liz has been in recovery for 6 years. We're grateful for her sharing some of her experience with us today. And so, Liz, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. I happen to know you. A number of our guests have been folks from inside the organization, and many of the listeners know that a lot of us are in recovery. And while we're in recovery, we all have different stories. We have different ways that we've gained experience, our strength, our hope. Some of us use the language sober. Some of us use the language clean. Whatever your preference is,
right.
We'll be doing that here too. So you've been clean for a while now. 6 years is.
Yes, I celebrated 6 years on July 8th.
Okay.
So I'm in my 7th year. And I work a 12-step fellowship and have an extensive network in recovery.
Before all that, there's obviously a story that, and oftentimes, especially myself, and I know the listeners, they want to sort of know what happened, right? Because there is the stuff that brought us in.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, as I reflect back on what brought me here, it's a number of things, but I can just remember back from being young and kind of just feeling alone. I was an only child for a long time. I didn't have my first sibling until I was 12, and then more when I was 16. But at that point, I had grown up alone, had a rough divorced upbringing. I mean, my parents both loved me very much. They did the best they could for me. But I always just wanted to fix what was going on around me and kind of shove my own feelings down, and never quite felt like I fit in or was part of, as long as I can remember. And I just wanted relief from pain and, like I said, just not being a part of. And I had this idea of what happy looked like. It fit inside this box, or what I thought it was supposed to, and it was the opposite of what had happened as I was growing up. And I just never thought I could get there. So it got really, I think it really started to get bad for me in middle school and progressed very quickly throughout high school. I went to many different high schools, went to 4, maybe 5, I'm not sure, I can't even remember. I moved around a lot. My parents didn't know what to do with me anymore. At that point, I just felt like I didn't have anything left to lose. Even at that young age, very quickly I would go down a hole of feelings, very, very big feelings all the time. And my parents just didn't know what to do with me. My mom thought it would be best if I moved in with my father. My father thought it would be best if it was I don't want to say militant, but very, very strict lists and rules. They didn't know what to do. And I just continued to do whatever it was that I wanted to do, which sometimes was great. Sometimes was getting good grades. Sometimes was playing on the softball team and in the marching band. But other times it was partying and what seemed to be like the normal teenage thing to do. But I was always the last one. It never quite sunk in. I was always the last one there. I always wanted one more. Even back then, it never let up.
Yeah, feelings of there's a common theme here, and no big surprise to us. Folks in recovery here sitting across from one another, that a lot of this goes back into childhood and feelings of feeling different or not belonging. I think that's very much a part of growing up. I mean, how can an adolescent really have a whole lot of a sample set to know what's going on in life? There's always those really special ones that they just seem to like everything. They're just popular. And
not me.
No, and it wasn't, me in a lot of aspects either. But it sounds like you sort of kicked the can down the road long enough to you tried cheerleading, you tried some sports, you were sort of looking to figure it out.
Yeah, it was devastating because you can't be partying and up all night and get your homework done.
No.
And show up to practice. So those things started to fall off for me in high school. I eventually wasn't chosen for the softball team because I had been suspended years in the year prior.
Did you move around all those schools because of getting kicked out of school? Or were you moving?
Mom said, try moving in with dad. So that was one move.
Right.
Getting suspended was one move into an alternative high school.
Right.
After that, it was social services. Parents didn't know what to do, so I ended up in social services.
So it's getting incrementally worse, I guess, if you will. Yeah. It's
foster care was another reason for a high school change. So there was that consistent change, trying to find my way in a new place over and over again, and kind of just losing the desire to just an overwhelming feeling of what's the point?
Right.
I don't know any other way to say it, but just kind of just looking around and just thinking to myself, what is the point? And that was a really poignant memory of mine from at the end of my active addiction, just waking up in the morning feeling sick and looking out, just looking out the window and seeing people go to work and just wondering why. What is the point of all of this? I was so empty.
Right. A particular point of interest for me in your story is it's not exactly the same as everyone else's, and not everyone's story is the same. Forget about, some people go to, fabulous treatment centers that are, on the beach somewhere, and others like myself went to a treatment center in Montgomery County that was it was an indigent, you didn't have insurance, right? Back in 2009, there was no Affordable Health Care Act. I was not employable at the particular time. I wasn't paying for insurance. Right. It's the last thing on the, and so, but treatment's not a part of your story.
No. At the end of the road for me in active addiction, the idea of even allowing myself to admit that I had a problem, because internally I knew, but saying that out loud, absolutely not, under no circumstances. And how could I possibly leave this? What would they do without me? Meanwhile, I'm using every single day, all day long. So what a twisted thought process that is. But once it got to a place where I was just at the very, very end of my road, I did go to the health department and, asked for help. And at that point, I had a few days under my belt of not using substances, and it just didn't work out for me.
It didn't, when your visit to the health department didn't work out for you as far as
getting into treatment.
Okay.
Right. So I also didn't have health insurance. I wasn't accepted into any sort of treatment program.
It wasn't available.
No. And it was, there's addiction in my family. And, it was actually my mom who said, I think you need to find a meeting. And I fought it, and I'm like, that's not for me. But a 12-step fellowship is what she was familiar with in our family. Her more on the supportive side of the 12-step fellowships.
Right.
And it just kind of always stuck in the back of my head that that was something that I could do. I wasn't willing to do it yet, but the moment that it clicked for me that I was willing to get help and look for help, it was there. It was there for me.
That's awesome. So how many attempts did you make at getting clean, getting sober? Was that
I tried a bunch of different things.
Yeah.
I mean, in my mind at the time, it probably does sound ridiculous, but because it is ridiculous. But one of the attempts I had was just white knuckling it, just sitting on the couch, don't go anywhere, don't talk to anybody, just sit there by myself. And the only thing that kept me going was Candy Crush at first. The game Candy Crush had started, or just came out, and I had my phone and two other family members' phones lined up on the table. And so when lives would run out of one game, I would go to the next and play, just to keep me sitting on the couch and not going anywhere. Well, that only lasted, I don't know, 7 days. And I was back out there.
The Candy Crush treatment program.
Candy Crush treatment program it did not work for me. That is not my experience. So that was just one of my thought processes. Maybe if I was to decide to have another baby, maybe that would work. Fortunately, all of those ideas, did not come to fruition. And, I found my way into the 12-step fellowship that helped save my life. But yeah, I tried a lot of different things and I had a lot of different thought processes of how I could do it without anyone knowing I was doing it.
Right.
But meanwhile, everyone knows that, that.
Yeah, we're the last to realize that everyone knows.
Right.
Right, and so.
Denial.
Yeah, sort of. I think Mark Twain said it best. Is that I've quit smoking 1,000 times. It's staying stopped is the keys, which sort of leads me into my. Next part of what I wanted to talk about is recovery networks. So you're in recovery now, right? The Candy Crush treatment didn't work. The other, you didn't get like so many, and that's what we try to do here in our organization is give people access to treatment. You weren't given access at that particular time. Right. There wasn't that available, but you did it, and you did it your way. So you're in recovery now. You have a recovery network, or you're developing one. How are recovery networks different for everyone? What does yours look like?
So mine started the very first day that I was open to a recovery process, because I did not understand the concept of so many people, A, not judging me, and B, just willing to help and willing to share their experience with me, help guide me along the way. Because my first decision was always wrong for a very, very long time. And admitting that was something I never was willing to do. I knew it all, because if I didn't, then what and who was I?
Right.
So the women, for me, mostly women for me, and there was a few men along the way that were definitely integral in my network and showing up. I just learned that how my network grew was just sharing that I needed help and willing to listen to whoever was there to help me. And over time, I noticed that they continuously showed up for me. And so I learned that that's what you do. That's how your network grows. Because my network to me is not necessarily somebody I talk to every single day. I have a very close circle of friends within my network. But my network it consists of people that are staying clean and sober, however you want to say it, in recovery. And are willing to show up when you ask for help, by sharing their experience with me.
It's one of the most interesting things about having a recovery network or being in recovery, actively engaged, is it tends to be one of the most sort of unattached, no strings attached way of helping. I have not seen anything quite like it, right? So again, going to treatment, getting the cobwebs out, learning a few things, that this is what I truly believe scientifically based is a disease model. And so I'm past that. So how do I treat my disease, right? Chronic, fatal, unless it's treated. Right. The treatment here, hopefully if there's not a underlying mental health disorder that requires medication, are these meetings and the recovery network. And it sounds like that's been your experience, is that these folks show up. I know for a fact that I've been asked to go out, and be by people's side at court dates, at divorces and things like that. And it's really something really pure about it.
It really is, because you don't have to explain why you're feeling the way you're feeling, because the situations change amongst the entire network of people. I could call any person in recovery and share a particular situation, and they might not have that experience in that situation, but they can certainly relate to the feelings, because like I said, my feelings have always not been right sized to what I'm dealing with. It's usually a catastrophe or super exciting.
The flat tire,
right. Always very big. It's funny you say that. I had 2 days clean or 3 days clean, and I got a flat tire. And it was like 11 o'clock at night. And I remember walking up and down 140 or the road and just screaming up into the sky saying, why? I'm clean. Why is this happening to me? I'm clean. It was a flat tire.
There's like a spare in the trunk, right?
That was it. No. Right. But I could call any one of those people, anybody, even if I didn't know them.
Right.
And say that happened to me, and the empathy and understanding, because we've all been through, for me, in my active addiction, things got really bad. And this is just this new way of life, going from the way it used to be to the way it is now, with, like you said, those pure relationships and just a solid underlying understanding of how we feel.
Yeah. Does anyone in your recovery network, or rather, is anyone in your recovery network not actually in recovery?
I think I have 2 or 3 people that are huge cheerleaders. And so I would say, sure, I consider them support.
Right.
They definitely are different than people in recovery, in my network of people in recovery. They understand to a point as best as they can, and maybe even have gone through some of the things that I'm going through that I'm sharing. But there's something special about someone else that's actually in this process of staying clean, losing the desire to use, and trying to be a productive member of society, that, say, my mom, who's one of my biggest cheerleaders, that she can't understand. And so, I lean on her for a lot of things. So yes, I'd consider her part of my support network, but my recovery network is just a little bit different, a little bit more special.
And yes, I would say the same thing for me. And while maybe people haven't walked the exact walk, the shared experience of those in recovery is quite unlike anything else. And so I have I like that word, cheerleaders. I call them my allies in recovery, and they're definitely there. I have found my recovery network is robust with people. Like there's an accountant, there's a plumber, there's electrician. I mean,
anybody.
You can really you can really find anybody to do sort of anything. Mechanics, lawyers,
because we can and do recover. And we become all of these things that we just didn't know that were possible. I mean, but I couldn't do it alone. I just couldn't. I tried with Candy Crush on my couch. I tried, like, in my bed every morning saying, like, I'm just not going to use today. And I tried to do that by myself over and over and over again.
And that's the important message here. Yeah. I mean, really, the listener here, as they hear us, and, a lot of times, since we've been in recovery for a little bit, it's not always as easy to just remember what it was exactly like in the beginning. And that's the bottom line, is we can't do it alone. Right.
Yeah, I'm sitting here thinking of that too, just as you say that sometimes it's hard to remember back in the very beginning, and it just triggered this thought that in the beginning, I thought I knew. And then, like, as the longer I'm around, the more I realize I don't know. And the more I realize that I do need people. This sense of pride, getting clean, or and getting some time under your belt, even a day or 2 days a week, and wanting to just do it perfectly. And my network has held me through imperfect recovery. The only thing I did perfect was not pick up.
That's right.
Not use. And it's crazy because the mistakes were so grave during active addiction, but mistakes happen every single day, throughout my day sometimes, over and over again sometimes. And my network are the people in recovery that help remind me that it's okay to make mistakes and things are going to be okay. And like, if I didn't have them, I wouldn't be sitting here. I just wouldn't.
Yeah. So unfortunately, as we're recording this, there's still very much a pandemic going on, COVID-19 pandemic. And it hasn't entirely blown over yet. And the whole landscape of certainly 12-step recovery, right? So it's on Zoom. How has the pandemic impacted the ways you're currently communicating with your network? Is it simply just the meetings? For me, it's like the meetings on Zoom. I'll meet up with a few people in recovery. Luckily, I work in this industry, so like,
right.
But for the folks that don't, right? You have a job and some totally, and something not related to this, and there's nobody in recovery that you work with,
right?
And then you go to these online meetings. What does that look like right now for you? It's
really tough. Adapting to change as a person in recovery is sometimes harder. And I became so familiar with the way in which I connected with my network, and that changed very quickly. And in the beginning, it was a matter of, we didn't really understand what was happening with COVID. So we were just trying to be safe in the very beginning. And that, wore down on everyone. I was willing to do whatever it took. I went to Zoom meetings and, talked often with FaceTime with, people in recovery. Mm-hmm. But it limited, like I said, I have a group of friends or a small group network that I keep in touch with regularly. But my network is extensive. People I would see going here or going there, and that stopped.
Yeah.
And Facebook is not really a good representation of where everyone is.
Yeah.
In reality.
Yeah.
So staying in touch, it has hurt. It has really hurt because the human connection is so important to me, with the network.
Sounds like
not feeling alone.
Yeah, it sounds like really what has happened is you get to really be more deliberate about it. So where perhaps going to meetings before that were in person, you're physically there. So you communicate with people. Oh, how you been? I haven't seen you in a while. Yeah, it happens, right? So right. This is more deliberate right now. You have to really be vigilant about. I need to pick up the phone.
Absolutely, especially people just coming into recovery now who's never experienced what I'm even talking about of going.
Right. Good point.
To meetings, and you just see people, and maybe you're new and someone sees you and they come and give you a hug or help you create your network. So it does pose this whole new idea of creating a network of people in recovery through Zoom and through phone calls. It takes some open-mindedness and willingness to push through that. But the good news is that we're here, So with that open-mindedness and willingness, it comes right back to you. Every time I reach out intentionally, it comes back twofold to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Well, folks, there you have it. There's no one way to achieve meaningful recovery. But most of us can agree with Liz that building a supportive foundation of friends who have been through what you've been through is really half the battle. I want to thank Liz Silverberg for sharing her incredible story with us today. If you or a loved one is struggling with substance abuse or co-occurring mental health disorders, call Amatus today at 855-80-SOBER or visit us at amatusrecoverycenters.com today. I'm Kabir Singh. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.